Welcome to today's Cybersecurity Insiders webinar on how to use network detection and response to mitigate the inevitable breach. My name is Holger Schulze. I am the founder of Cybersecurity Insiders, the online community for cybersecurity professionals, and I'm your moderator today. Today's webinar is brought to you by Enea, and Enea is one of the world's leading specialists in software for telecommunications and cybersecurity. The Qosmos division of Enea specializes in network traffic analysis that identifies and classifies data up to the application level. Qosmos technology is embedded in cybersecurity solutions to improve threat detection and strengthen network protection. Given recent high-profile cyber incidents, right, at SolarWinds, Microsoft, T-Mobile, Facebook, or a couple months ago, Colonial Pipeline, it is not surprising that 71% of respondents to our recent Cybersecurity Insiders survey consider network traffic analysis, or NTA in short, to be critically important for detecting threats that have evaded endpoint and perimeter defenses. And during this webinar, you will hear from cybersecurity experts at Enea, AvidThink, and Cybersecurity Insiders as we discuss key findings from this survey, followed by a demonstration of network intelligence technology. So without further delay, let's introduce our panelists. And first, I'd like to welcome Laura Wilbur. And Laura is an industry analyst in networking and cybersecurity, and she'll be moderating our discussion today. Welcome, Laura.
Hello, Holger. Hello, thank you.
And our two panelists are Roy Chua, founder and principal of AvidThink. Welcome, Roy.
Thanks, Holger. Glad to be here.
And next, I'd like to welcome Sébastien Sunol, and Sébastien is product manager at Enea Qosmos. Welcome, Sébastien.
Thanks, Holger, and hello to everyone.
All right, so let's take a quick look at today's agenda. First, as I mentioned earlier, we will look at NDR, network detection and response, and see what it is, right, what it does, and why it matters. Then we will take a quick look at some of the key results from the NDR survey, basically taking a deeper look into perception versus reality, right, including best practices and some key lessons from the field. Finally, we'll see a demo to take a deeper look at NDR technology. And with that, let's dive right in. Laura, take it away.
Okay, thank you. I am going to be leading our discussion with our two panelists, and before I begin, I would like you to get to know them a little better. So maybe if we could just take one moment, Roy, if you would introduce yourself, and then I'll let Sébastien do the same.
Yep, absolutely, and thank you, Laura. Hi, I'm Roy again, and I am the principal over at AvidThink. AvidThink is a research and analysis company covering technology infrastructure, including security. AvidThink used to be part of a publication called SDX Central. We were the research group, and after co-founding that in 2012, we actually took the research group and spun it out in 2018 as an independent analyst company. We cover a lot of the key technologies that I'm sure you're seeing across the board, whether you're enterprise or service provider, in the form of 5G, edge and cloud, IoT, and then some of the hot topics, SASE and SD-WAN, and obviously network security as well. So glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Thanks very much for joining. And now, Sébastien.
Yes, thanks, Laura. So I'm Sébastien Sinold. I'm product manager at Enea, which is a large European software company, which has a solid portfolio in traffic intelligence products in the Qosmos division of Enea. And it covers many security aspects like firewalling or traffic policies in SD-WAN or SASE solution. But today, we clearly see from the market that traffic intelligence, especially packaged in a passive cyber sensor, is becoming a must-have to complement traditional IDS and build efficient network detection and response system. So this will be the topic of today.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you, Sébastien, for joining us. It's great to have such two experts, deep experts in their field to join the discussion of our survey. And we're going to start right away with just making sure that we're all on the same page with our definitions of what do we mean by NDR and why does it matter? Why are we all here today? Then we'll dive into, we're going to take a quick audience poll, as Holger mentioned, and then we'll dive into the results and on with the demo. So first, just at a very broad level, network detection and response. It's threat detection based on actual traffic flows, the data, the applications, the services, the content, the flow patterns, real telemetry data of what's happening on your network right now, and not logs. And the whole purpose, of course, is to find, to surface up weak signal indications of threats on your network that have either been missed by your endpoint and perimeter defense, or simply of a type that those types of defense systems cannot recognize. And if we want to dive a little bit deeper into what are the components of network detection and response solution, it's composed of, it's sort of a marriage of two technologies which are different in strategy but both network based. And I'm going to warn you here that I'm going to simplify a little bit here on the definitions of network traffic analysis and IDS, because as we know in cybersecurity, there's a lot of tools out there that use a lot of different techniques. But let's stick to the basics to have these two core components. On one side, you have network traffic analysis, which is anomaly based. You're looking for unknown threats. Typically, you're going to use machine learning to do this, and it's a custom solution. And importantly, it works on encrypted traffic. On the other side, we have our IDS, IPS system, and we're going to be looking for known threats. And it's also looking for anomalous patterns, but these anomalies are ones that have already been detected, associated with a threat, and codified into a signature. So they're known threats, generally out of the box and made to work on clear traffic rather than encrypted traffic. So on the NTA side, it works by, you have a cyber sensor like the Qosmos probe that's embedded. You collect your traffic data, you build a model of what is normal for your particular network in terms of apps, connections, services, etc. And then you can detect deviations from your model that could indicate a threat. And that can be from your machine learning and from the sensor analytics as well. Then you use all that good traffic data to try and determine which of these particular anomalies represent a threat and which ones are harmless, and you develop rules. On the IDS set, IDS, much more mature, been around a long, long time. You're going to be monitoring traffic and looking for patterns that you can match to signatures. And then you're going to take action, the P in the IPS, and enforce your rules. And why does NDR matter? Well, Holger laid this out for us very well right at the beginning with these high-profile attacks. Whether it's some of the recent nation state or supposed nation state attacks, whether it's someone looking for economic gain, political gain, military, whatnot, or increasingly criminals that are using APT style tactics for extortion for very high ransomware. Regardless, these types of attacks have shown that there really is no foolproof endpoint or perimeter defense. They're extremely malignantly clever, these types of attacks, and the damage can be enormous. And this is, of course, the main driver behind NDR. And I have to say also, this isn't the subject of this webinar, but it's also an important impetus for zero trust architectures. Those have also been shown to be very effective against APTs, and in fact, very often zero trust and NDR are combined. But on with NDR. And I think at this moment, before we stop here and look into the poll result, into the survey results, we're going to take a quick poll. And I'm going to let Holger open that up and run that for us. It'll take just a moment.
Yes, exactly. And I launched the poll, so everybody should be seeing the polling question on your screens. The question is, have you experienced a breach that your IDS, your intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system did not catch? So let's give this a couple more seconds for everybody to select their answer choices. And there's basically three choices: yes, no, or not sure. Laura, the answer choices, or the responses rather, are coming in.
Okay.
And I'm going to close that poll in a second. And it's quite interesting. Let me know if you can see the poll results. And it basically looks like 18% answered yes, they have experienced a breach that IDS didn't catch. 45% say no, they have not. And a little more than a third, 36% say they're not sure. Laura, what do you make of this?
Well, that's very interesting, and I think up there with our 18%, roughly 1 in 5 saying that there has been a breach that they know has gotten through, even though they have IDS. I'm guessing that those folks out there listening right now, you're our early adopters that we'll be looking at in the survey results, who have already deployed an NDR solution. And for the 36, I would imagine the majority are probably in the I'm not sure camp. And I think that that's one of the sort of prime drivers for NDR. It's like the network visibility gaps that so many struggle with. Is what you don't know can literally kill you. And when you have APTs that can be operating for 150, 200 days, you're not going to be sure, probably ever. And I think probably the strongest defense posture is to assume that you have been breached. Okay, so let's continue on with our results. Oops. I don't know if you have to return it to me, Holger. There. Okay, thanks. Now let's look at our survey results. So first up, as Holger mentioned, this number actually was, by the time the final tally was in, was up, Holger, from 71 to 73%. The reported saying that using network traffic analysis to detect anomalies that evaded these defenses is either important to critically important. So certainly the awareness is very high of the importance of network traffic analysis. Now, when you look at the broader adoption of network defense and response solutions, which is a platform that has both the NTA and the IDS inside, 55% either have already deployed or are planning to deploy NDR. And for me, I think that's really a remarkably high figure, given that it's really only been the past couple of years that you've started to see mature NDR solutions on the market. So going back to what you said, Holger, that's an indication of, I think, some of these high-profile attacks that we've experienced recently. Now let's take a look to begin our survey results at network visibility. So we asked respondents, where do you feel you have the most important network visibility gaps? And coming out at the top of the list, it was cloud workload traffic, connected devices, SaaS apps, and local traffic. And I think, for local traffic, that's the one I think we would all expect to see there, because the east-west traffic, the indicators of lateral movement, is such a core marker and technique of APTs. So I thought maybe we could look at the 3 that came in above these indicators of lateral movement with the east-west traffic. And that's the cloud, the focus on cloud and connected devices. So I was curious in seeing this, Seb, since you've been working with a lot of NDR vendors lately, does this line up with what you're hearing on the front lines in terms of where customers' challenges are for visibility?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, this result is not a surprise at all. For years now, corporate IT is more and more hosted in the cloud for customer relationship management, HR function, accounting, or many other internal web services. So the trend of moving to the cloud and also moving the security of the threat to the cloud is not new, but the security challenge still remains a concern. And on the opposite, for the devices, we see that offices are now equipped with a large variety of connected devices like security equipment, camera, physical access control, video conferencing tools, printers, obviously, and even in the kitchen, how fridges or food dispensers are connected to the internet. So there is those two trends. I would say professional applications are hosted on the cloud, and on-premise, there's still those, I would say, IoT devices. But the only good news is that all those equipment communicate with IP protocols. So that's why NTA has become very trendy, because it's the only way to gain full visibility on all your equipment. So as a product manager, clearly the field drives us in those two directions, the coverage of all corporate SaaS application, and on the other hand, a very good coverage in device detection and device identification.
Okay, thank you. So that does make sense with what you're seeing in the market. And also related to this cloud and connected devices, and thinking about these APTs of late and cloud and connected devices, how much that is a part of how our networks have changed. I was wondering, Roy, as our deep network expert, how much of the current challenges around APTs do you think are coming simply from the complexity of today's network, maybe more so even than the tactics of the attackers?
Yeah, so I think, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but we do cover that space, and we do talk to enterprises and service providers as well, and the cloud providers too. I would say that I think one of the key things that the industry now is starting to understand is that complexity is one of the biggest enemies of security, really. And the more complex our networks become, the more complex our controls and resources become. As Sebastian was saying, we're using a lot more cloud services, a lot more things in disparate places where enterprise IT traditionally had control. They don't have control anymore. And so that evolution to cloud, to mobile, the use of 5G, the reliance on automation and digitization with IoT, right? So IoT, IIoT, OT, all those acronyms that fall into operation technologies. The use of all these things are great because they allow digitization, automation, which allows streamlining innovation. But the flip side of that is that there is increased complexity, and complexity in terms of the depth of understanding of the protocols and the applications, and the breadth in terms of both the locations and the type of protocols and applications that need to be covered. And so that's a big challenge as we're talking to enterprise IT, and they recognize that they can't do it themselves, and so they're looking to the vendors and the service providers to give them the tools and the visibility that they need, along with other technologies, to help get some control. And that's why you see SD-WAN and SASE and a lot of the managed services getting a lot of traction, or managed security in the form of managed security service providers get traction, just because the enterprises can't manage the complexity that they used to.
Okay, yeah, and that complexity tied right in with the visibility. So, and obviously that sounds like then the network complexity is both a huge and real security challenge, as well as sort of has a psychological impact of not feeling like you can see and control what's on these extended diverse networks. Thank you. And now let's go a little more specific. We asked exactly which threats do you consider it most important for an NDR to address? And coming in on the top three, we had command and control, followed by ransomware, and then data exfiltration. And when I was considering that result, I was wondering, I'd like feedback from you both on this, but to see command and control come in at 69% to top the list so strongly, headline-wise, you see more detailed specifics, ransomware and phishing and whatnot. Seb, what do you make of that?
Well, actually, the recent history has shown that malware could be introduced in any network, whatever the level of protection you put in place. We see in the SolarWinds attack that it could be via the supply chain, or also you can have insiders that install malware into your network. So it then becomes crucial that the activity of the malware, what installed, is detected at the earlier stage in order to avoid damages. So the command and control connection is in a way, the last chance to be safe and to avoid, any problem with the malware running on your network. So this is why I think there's such a strong focus. But the challenge is that command and control are using usually legitimate protocol or encrypted protocol, which are difficult to block without affecting the network services used by the employees. So the rule based on predictive on IP address or domain blacklist is still needed, but it's not sufficient. So it has to be completed with more insight on, especially on encrypted traffic, and enriched with machine learning models in order to detect those very weak signals and be able to be aware at least as soon as the command and control connection takes place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Roy? Does that line up with what you've seen?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. And what Seb was pointing out in terms of command and control being that launching point is a big deal, and that's why I think enterprises worry about it, because the CNC itself, having a CNC attack in and of itself is not directly business impacting, but it is the enabler and it's a foundation, a platform for the attackers to go after a couple of things. And the way I look at it is I break it down into sort of three very high level categories. The first one is, if you have the CNC in place, then it's usually a precursor to IP or intellectual property loss or corruption. And so that data theft and exfiltration, which is one of those items there, it's definitely a problem, right? Selective corruption modification, right? The second one category is operational disruption, and that's in the form of ransomware, which again is number two there, or data, straight data destruction, or system shutdown reboots, either for fun or for other malicious purposes, right? And then the third category I see is increase in liability, corporate liability and exposure, because the CNC becomes platforms for future attacks, not just on the corporation itself, but it's a launching point of installing a botnet or then using it as a platform for DDoSing, denial of service attack, other people. And so I think, that's why the CNC attacks come in at number one, because it is truly the enabler for a lot of business disruption.
Yep, that's exactly the word that came to my mind listening to you speak there. That is really a pivotal enabler of so many of the evils that everybody on the front line is having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to coverage, to network coverage. So the question was posed, what kind of networks do you think an NDR should cover? And I think this is interesting here, an overwhelming number, 91% fully expected their NDR to cover IT and hybrid networks with OT and LAN WAN, also the cloud workloads. They also expected it to cover IoT and IIoT dedicated networks, even OT networks, and even 5G networks. I'm hearing a lot of resonance with some of what you were saying, talking about earlier there, Roy, with the new complexity. But one thing that kind of jumped out at me was actually the response that came in towards the end of this chart. It's still 1 in 5 mentioned specifically that they think an NDR should cover private 5G. And this surprised me. I thought that was a kind of a high number, but I may be wrong. Roy, I know you've worked a lot with 5G and private 5G. Does this surprise you?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Yes, we are working with vendors and carriers in the private 5G space, and it is a little surprising that there is that much visibility and concern about that. Because I think realistically, if we look worldwide, there are sort of high hundreds to maybe low thousands at most private networks in deployment that are sizable, right? So not a couple of nodes, but many. And most of them are actually private 4G LTE transitioning to 5G. And so, but if we lump them all together, right? If we lump them all together, then I would say that that's private networks. There's many interests in today for private networks. The deployments are around industrial automation, mining, transportation hubs, ports, shipping ports, and oil and gas, right? And so I think if you look at that for those private networks, a lot of these are critical infrastructure, right? And so I think there is obviously heightened concern around many of these private networks being critical infrastructure and the desire to protect them. So I think that's probably contributing to that answer. I think the second one really, I think it's just the hype and the buzz around 5G and private 5G. Given the visibility, I think it's now top of mind. So I guess it's good that they're thinking about it earlier than later. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe a little bit of that is buzz. Maybe it is a little bit of visionary on the part of our respondents in terms of the growth, but certainly the stakes, as you mentioned earlier, in talking about the industrialization and IoT and IIoT being critical for a business transformation, but also opening up on some scary vulnerabilities given the stakes and how well you have to be sure that you do it right when it comes to security. Thanks. Okay, now in addition to what the top threats were, etc., and coverage, we also asked beyond the core of the DNA of NDR, so to speak, anomaly detection. What other kind of capabilities do you think an NDR should have? So all of our vendors out there listening up. Number one, device detection. Number two was flexible querying for threat hunting, and proactive threat hunting is a big important capability of NDR. And then the next one was auto suggestions for rules and incidents response. Of course, it's not only important to detect threats, but to be able to do something about them. So in looking at those particular results, I thought it was interesting that of all the kind of possibilities, and there were even more answers that we don't show here that you can see in the full report, but that device detection topped it off. And maybe Seb, you could address this, because I just found it really interesting that network detection and response was expected to do endpoint detection or endpoint classification, at least. What do you make of that?
Yes, probably because traditional IT security is based on endpoint detection and response, meaning running agents on the device to ensure security. But by definition, this does not cover all the connected devices which do not run this agent, because the variety of device and operating system you have on your network make your agent not possible to run on each and every environment. But the good news also here is that every device emits fingerprints on the network, allowing it to detect it. For instance, the MAC address, obviously, of manufacturer information, but also inside the DHCP transaction or TCP characteristic, like Windows sites, for instance, or user agents for some protocols, are very useful fingerprint to retrieve reliably information about all your connected device, like the manufacturer, the OS version, the software running on it. So yes, so it's increasing the role of the NTA on the NDR system, because now the NTA is able to list all your connected device and identify them.
Okay, so it's the ability to use network traffic, as you mentioned, through this fingerprinting to detect what's connected to your device in a purely passive way. So you never touch the device, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, that makes sense why that would be an expectation then for NDR. And as we saw earlier, there was a lot of concern about visibility around devices. And now let's look specifically at adoption, because we saw up front, 73% think NDR is important. You've got 55% already out there, either having adopted or planning to. But I think the number was like 25% were like, no plans. And so we thought we'd dig into a little bit of, if you don't plan to adopt it, what are the reasons? So the top three that came up were, number one, too expensive, not enough budget. The next was concerns about the reliability of behavioral analytics and machine learning. And then in number three was not so much a rejection of NDR, but a preference that NDR be integrated into an existing platform. And there's usually concern around the multiplication of the number of tools that security folks have to deal with. So I thought maybe we could touch on just these top two, then the budget issues, the cost concerns, and ML maturity. For the cost part, Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, Seb. As embedded technology,
Yeah.
supplier, you work with a range of different vendors. Is this cost concern justified?
The first of all, regarding the cost, we can split it in two parts. So there's the software license cost from the security vendor and the hardware cost. And usually the hardware cost is a kind of blocking because for machine learning techniques, you need to ingest a lot of data, so a lot of storage capability are needed, and also a lot of processing on all this data. So this is why it's very important to have a very good quality of input data and also selective set of input data. There's a lot of information that you don't need. If you have a full packet capture, you don't need all the encrypted session. You just need the details of it. So that's a way to reduce the cost. But also the cost has to be seen in comparison to the risk. A recent study from IBM shows that a data leak in average costs $4 million for a company. And the overall cost of cyber attacks has been estimated to $6,000 billion in 2021. So yeah, you always need to compare the cost and the risk. And yeah, the cost is tending to be reduced over time with new technologies and new approaches, but the risk remains the same.
That's very interesting, and I think that is kind of across the board. That's the math ultimately that has to be done, and solution cost always versus the cost of a breach, which we know keeps rising. But the other point was very interesting in terms of, I assume that means the using something like a cyber sensor, you can much more selectively, for instance, retain metadata rather than doing full capture. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reduce by a factor of 150% the amount of data you need to store. So yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting because my initial reaction was I think whenever people hear the word machine learning or the phrase, they automatically think of big data and massive storage and massive processing. So that's important to know that within NDR solutions, you can have this smart way to at least address that part of the cost equation. Okay, let's look at the other side, the other piece of this, the other side of this coin, which was ML maturity. And I know that, Roy, you've been doing a lot of writing and thinking and talking about machine learning and these types of advanced analytics in network orchestration, network operations, and also in security as well. And maybe you could talk about this. Is it too early for people to be investing seriously in machine learning and security?
I would say no. Actually, it turns out, at least our opinion and what we've learned in working with vendors, networking vendors who've used machine learning for, as you point out, both operational and security, and as well as some of the service providers who are using the same kind of technology, that security, or in particular network security, is actually a particularly good candidate for use of ML, and it satisfies a lot of the categories, including lots of training data out there that's available, and in many cases that data has been human tagged in terms of this is malicious, this is not malicious, and so I would say that that's one element. The second one is that similarity of modus operandi, meaning that the attackers use similar techniques and similar attacks across many companies, and so that definitely helps in getting spotted. But there's usually some kind of slight difference, so it's not exactly the same, but there is similarity, and I think that's what allows that machine learning that's so good at categorizing and finding cat videos on the internet do the same thing with the attacks on the network. And in terms of use of ML, I would say it is maturing. It is getting a lot better. A lot of vendors are making a lot of investment around using that data that comes from the network and the network observation to get higher level learnings from that, both in supervised learning, as I'm saying, categorizing and tagging based on what humans have assisted with, as well as unsupervised, finding clusters and anomalies in the traffic as well. And ML has been proven to actually be able to spot both short-term trends on the fast attacks, also longer-term trends, being able to automatically adapt to day of week, week of month of year type patterns and reducing the amount of false positives that I know we all hate from all the the good old IDS, IPS days, where it's so much that it's useless, right? And so I think in an assistive manner, even in a semi-automated manner, what we're seeing is AI ML is helping in many ways. And as I indicated, network traffic is one that actually lends itself quite well to that technology.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. I think that's very helpful, and a lot of folks will find that reassuring. So the importance is to think about the domain, the context, the availability of data, and obviously this is an industry that's been working with a lot of historical data, so that does look like a good candidate. And I was thinking while you were mentioning that the IBM cost of a data breach for a 2021 report, they didn't split it out, but they did mention that companies that have adopted machine learning and automation for security ops and for cybersecurity. They didn't just divide operations and threat detection, but anyway, using it in the cybersecurity domain, had an 80% lower cost of breach figure, and as well as a 27% faster time to detection. So I think that those kind of numbers do align with what you were just saying in terms of fitting with the domain and the context in terms of confidence.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, there are many more survey results, but you'll get the report. All of you are free to look through those, dig into those, and contact us, the participants, afterwards. And of course, ask some questions right here at the end. But now we're going to take a few moments for a demo, and I thought it would be helpful if Sebastian could do a demonstration of particularly of the sensor technology. We're going to go down to the foundation, which is the data foundation of NTA and NDR, to show what types of things a sensor could surface in relationship to an IDS in the context of an APT, and why these two are a natural complement, and therefore why they're being combined into NDR solutions today. So Seb, I'm going to let you go through the demo, if you would, for us, and then we'll do our questions.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, I would like to introduce the role of the cyber sensor in the NDR system. The sensor actually complements a traditional rules-based IDS, and it acts as an extra source of information for detection engines that can be based on machine learning techniques or other type of data analysis. So the sensor is built to be easily integrated in existing NDR platform. Usually it's a complement to something you add to an existing solution. So it has to support most common network data formats like IPFIG, JSON, CSV, and also the mapping with the existing data source is important, that every field has the same name. So that's clearly the role. It's a complement running aside an IDS.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And now we'll look at the actual configuration here that I believe this is what you use for your demo.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for the demo, we're using obviously the Qosmos probe as a cyber sensor. We're using Suricata as an IDS. And we post both data in the ETL function, extract, transform, and load, which is done by Logstash. Here it's really a key role because it has to do data deduplication. We see that cost is an important concern, so it's important here to be selective and not sending many times the same information. So this is the role of the ETL. And the ETL is also responsible for normalizing the data across the different data sources. Here we have only two different data sources, but you might have also logs from your router, switches, and other ones. So the ETL need to normalize all that before inserting all the data to a database. So here Elasticsearch, and we're using on the demo Kibana for visualization dashboard. So here it's just an example, but it could work exactly the same way with a Splunk or other SIEM activity.
Okay, excellent. So, and let's take a look here using this this demo configuration you did, starting with this network overview. What is this?
Yeah, so this is actually the data, a way to visualize the data extracted by the cyber sensor, and it gives you an exhaustive view of all your network traffic. You see here on the top left pane with a family that it shows the bandwidth usage per protocol category. So it could be email, web traffic, instant messaging. We have a set of categories. And this kind of categorization allows you to quickly profile your traffic and create custom rules on your expected network usage. For instance, if your daily email volumes suddenly double, that's a concern. Or if the number of web connection to an unknown servers increase suddenly, it's something you see clearly, and it's quite easy with this kind of tool to create machine learning models on top of that.
Okay.
But also, it has to be configured network by network. So here the administrator has the ability to create his own category. That's what you see below in the pane category. So you can have a whitelist of protocols, something you allow, you don't worry about, and then a list of different, I would say, type of traffic you want to look closely. So obviously there's some, I would say, traffic you don't want to see clearly, like a cryptocurrency or maybe peer-to-peer, you want to forbid that, or any evasive traffic, people that using proxy or strange tunnelings. So this is also an alert by itself that is directly identified by the sensor. And with the amount of traffic that you have on an overall network, having this single page view is very useful as a, I would say, day-to-day dashboard for an administrator.
Okay, so in addition to the visualization, this is here the fundamental part of having super granular data to do that initial baseline model of what your look like, your actually looks like.
And if you compare with an open source tool like Zik supports something like 100 protocol, where cyber sensor support almost 4,000. So obviously in terms of visibility and granularity of your data, it is very different, and it helps a lot to design your machine learning models and detect deviation. That granularity is mandatory.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing. And now let's look what's happening here.
So here, so obviously, everything that is on your whitelist is safe, but then the administrator is focusing on what is not in his whitelist. And here we see that in that example, that many bad examples. So it's really the example of a very bad network with a lot of threats. And here, so aside the whitelist, we see a lot of crypto mining traffic running on the network. We also see a lot of anonymizer, and that's very common. People using Hotspot Shield or CyberGhost, UltraSurf to escape from traditional protection. And this is one important goal of traffic intelligence, is to identify all this and everything that is unwanted.
Okay, and I think probably here it's important too with the NDA that you can do this on encrypted traffic, whereas usually IDS is on clear traffic. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So that's also, we have a variety of techniques. Actually, we see that in the classification method pane on the middle. There's many ways to identify traffic. It's obviously not only pattern matching or port based, but we analyze content. We look at the session behavior. We do statistical analysis of the number of packets. So there's really a variety of techniques to reliably detect that. And this is what is traffic intelligence, and which go much beyond the DPI or the traditional DPI that people know.
Yes, and I know also Enea, I happen to know, also uses machine learning for that part too.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Okay, and I think now here you're going to zoom in.
Yes, so aside obviously the obvious threats, so when you see a protocol or an application you don't want to see, that's an obvious threat. But more and more command and control are using standard protocol. So this is why you would put here a focus on, I would say, all the network services that any network must allow, NFS, SSH, RDP, for instance. And this is usually in this type of traffic that you need really to detect the very weak signals, because command and control typically are using this. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, and I think too on that one, you had started with right 30 from 50 some thousand to 36,000 flows, and this you're restricting it even further down here. It's the 500.
Absolutely. So you start from your full network visibility, and then you'll drill down and exclude what is safe, and then focusing on what is not. But here, so the protocols themselves are safe, NFS, RDP, and all that, and it's happened on the network. So another level of visibility is to see the location. Typically, if you have a RDP connection coming from a public IP inside your network, that's something you need to be worried about, especially if you don't know the IP address. So this gives a global view of all your network service traffic. And if you go to the next slide, we can filter this traffic and only focusing on every traffic that's going to the public network, to the public internet. And that's clearly something we need to worry about, because there's no reason that on the public internet an RDP host is present, except if it's part of the internal network because the IP address is known. So here in a few clicks, 3 clicks actually, you're able to identify everything that's go using a standard service to the public network. And that's, I would say, not necessarily all of them are command and control connection, but possibly. And here we see that we only have 58 flow left. On the beginning, we have 1,000 more flow. We got 50 something thousand. So here really you're focusing and now spotting a few flows that are suspicious.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, with traffic intelligence, you can also have a lot of details about those flows. So obviously, you can have the volume, number of packets in, is there response, so how many packets in, how many packets out, all this kind of information. And here we see that there are actually 2 IP addresses that are concerned. So I had to mask them because it's come from a real scenario, and obviously I don't want to disclose the IP of the client, but we see 2 IPs that are suspicious. So then usually the administrator is focusing on one and try to understand or block this IP address if it's not safe, but at least investigate on it, because that's a big threat. And what is important, if you go to the next pane, because we actually, as we see in the beginning, Suricata IDS and the cyber sensor are running in parallel. And if I'm now filtering on this very suspicious IP address and look at what Suricata has detected, we see that it just detected 3 flows without even classifying them. So we don't know if it's RDP, what kind of application it is. It's completely unknown. So typically those connections there, which are clearly command and control connection, have gone completely beyond, well, below the radar of the IDS. And yeah, this really illustrates on a concrete example. So this is a real case from actually the Sunburst attack, where the cyber sensor helps a lot to identify those very weak signals where an IDS will be blind on that.
Yes, thanks. Because yes, that was Sunburst, and I think Clonal Pipeline, and quite a few were using those very important sort of common protocols that normally wouldn't be suspicious until you start drilling down in this way. Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Seb. And then we'll let some folks can ask some questions about that, and too, the particular, since this was based on Sunburst in terms of what you can see in the APT, there may be questions on that. So before we get to our questions, just again, thank you. The reason these two go so well together, your cyber sensor is a really nice complement for IDS in terms of seeing some things that the IDS can't see, as well as reducing false positives, etc. We know it improves machine learning, makes the threat hunting easier with the contextual data, in the ability to surface additional patterns. And certainly all of that in the end, the additional data helps make more effective rules. And now I will turn things back over to Holger, who I think has been tracking our Q&As, and we'll have a chance for our panelists here to receive some questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. All right, let's see. The first question, how does a DPI sensor handle encrypted traffic? Who wants to take that one?
Oh yeah, I can take this one. So there's no one single answer because it's really a variety of techniques. First of all, they depend on the type of encryption, but for TLS, for instance, we still have information from the SNI, for instance, on the certificate, we can have information. Also on DNS queries that comes before the encrypted connection. From the DNS query, we can get information. So that's one way. But also we are doing, machine learning models on the number of packets, size of packets, delays between packets, ratio between incoming and outgoing packets. And with this model, we're able to reliably identify, is it a video call, an audio call, is it a chat, is it a web browsing? So there's a variety of techniques. It can be some simple ones, sometimes it can be quite complex. And also, session correlation is important, especially when you have complex protocol with signaling and then the data protocol like SIP and RTP. When you identify the control properly, so then you can also classify the subsequent data flow, even if encrypted. So it's really a variety of techniques grouped together in order to provide this visibility on encrypted traffic.
Very good, thank you. The next question, besides NDR, what other kind of cybersecurity is Qosmos embedded in?
So Qosmos provide, aside the sensor, it also provide the traffic intelligence in the form of a software development kit. So it's a C libraries that can be integrated typically in firewalls to block traffic for illegitimate application, for instance, but also more and more in a SASE solution or SD-WAN solution to do intelligent traffic routing, traffic steering. So there's kind of a variety of security equipment that require traffic intelligence, but typically a firewall, SASE, SD-WAN solution, or obviously sensors to complement IDS.
Very good, thank you. The next question I think is for Roy. Some of the respondents to the survey said they preferred NDR to be integrated into existing or broader security platforms. I was wondering what other types of security products are actually integrating NDR? Roy?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So some of the products I think we've heard from SAP already, where there are sort of two ways to do it, right? You use it for traffic intelligence, use it for routing and application recognition and categorization, so you can make more intelligent decisions around quality of service and route selection. The other thing we're seeing is a desire, which is why you're seeing that transition from SD-WAN to SASE, a desire to integrate more sophisticated technologies into that WAN edge. And so we hear from some of the enterprise clients that they want to see integration. It's not just the connectivity, it's not just the basic security, but it's more sophisticated ability to actually see what's going on and respond to the threats. It's not just basic connectivity anymore. It's that security, visibility, and control and operational elements that go with the enterprise WAN. And likewise, we're seeing that demand go into the two other areas. One is the data center, and the other one's a campus as well. And so Likewise, the request is similar for Wi-Fi in campus, looking for NDR type capabilities incorporated into some kind of campus fabric management system. And likewise on the data center side, looking for that visibility on east-west lateral movements, and as well as for incoming applications to provide that level of visibility and response. So it's migrating on the enterprise side, and same with service providers, from basic connectivity into security and the ability to do something and operationalize the security. And so seeing NDR demands or NDR capabilities being incorporated into the management systems and connectivity systems across all of that, the WAN to the campus to the data center.
Excellent, thank you, Roy. Looks like we have time for maybe one or two more questions. The next question is, could you tell me more about how Qosmos technology compares to open source DPI like Zeek, Bro?
Actually, Zeek and Bro are more rule-based engines, so it's allowed to create a set of rules to be alerted when something happens. And they are very efficient to do that. But where they're not efficient at is detecting the traffic up to the application level, especially when the traffic is encrypted. Those open source tools mainly focus on standard protocol. So to identify SSH, HTTP, SMTP, that would be fine. But when it comes to identify some proxies, some anonymizer, peer-to-peer, Skype, or anything that is not standardized, then those tools like Snort or Suricata or Zeek or even OpenDPI are not good at all to do that. So traffic intelligence really differentiates from that for its capability, thanks to a variety of techniques to detect reliably all the traffic, categorizing it with, as I said, almost 4,000 different applications that are detected. And also regarding IoT and device detection, this is also important feature that you can find in traffic intelligence that do not exist in such open source tool. Be able to identify the device is also something very special to Qosmos DPI or traffic intelligence.
Thank you, Sebastian. Yeah, looks like we have time for one more question. And the question is, what is the performance impact of having these sensors running on a network?
So typically, we need one core to analyze 1 gigabit of traffic. So that's the overall footprint in terms of CPU power needed, 1 core per gigabit. And in terms of memory, it's between 2 and 4 gigabytes per gigabit to be analyzed. So it's still acceptable, I think. And with, I would say, a recent fast machine, you can have something like 50 cores on it. And in terms of memory, it's hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes. So a single machine that's really a very, very high throughput. But yes, good. Yeah, it's 1 gigabit. You need 1 core, and let's say 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's a good assessment for traffic intelligence.
Very good. Thank you, Sebastian. Laura, back to you. Any closing thoughts?
No, I just want to say we've only got 1 minute here left. That I want to thank both of our guests. Thank you for hosting at Cybersecurity Insiders, Holger. And I've got a couple of links here for anybody that would like to learn a little bit more about AvidThink and their services, their products, and of course a couple of places where you can deep dive a little bit into Qosmos products. And I would say, if you have a chance, there's the full demo, part of what we showed that Seb demonstrated on Sunburst, particularly taking apart the Sunburst attack via SolarWinds and looking at what kind of role a cyber sensor plays and how it works together in such a scenario with IDS. So check that out on YouTube if you get a chance.
Again, thank you, Laura, Roy, and Sebastian for sharing your insights on network detection.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, as we're closing this webinar, I would like to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. This concludes today's session. I hope we will see all of you again at one of our future webinars. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.